cannot believe that there is still a significant gap between the strategic planning and successful implementation. And this is often referred as the strategy to execution gap. And there is even some data. Harvard Business Review claims that there is approximately, that organizations lose 40% of their strategy potential value due to breakdowns in execution. Then you see some data from the Project Management Institute that found that 37% of projects fail due to a lack of clearly defined objectives and milestones to measure progress. Listen, the reality is that back in my days in corporate, it was already a problem, a big challenge. It was like approximately 20 years ago and so on. That was already a big challenge. And it's astonishing that still today we have that challenge. Now, today, my guest is somebody who has been already going around different corporations in order to help them solve the problems, help them with the strategic planning and alignment. His name is Anthony Taylor. He's the CEO of SME Strategy. He's also, by the way, the author of 2 books. One of them, by the way, is talking only about alignment. So you have made a book only about alignment. This is quite impressive. And he's also the host of a strategy and leadership podcast. By the way, I also recommend it because for preparing this interview, I had to go around and sneak a little bit his style. Anthony, thank you very much for being with me today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for sharing the scope of the problem, and I'm really looking forward to digging into it in our chat.
That's amazing. By the way, Anthony, just to give a little bit of context, so I saw that you have been, prior to founding your company, SME Strategy, you have been working in the corporate world quite a lot. Is that correct?
No, technically I was a waiter by trade, but I've had a lot of different contracts for different organizations, but no, most of the work is done self-taught in no actual like formal capacity, to be honest.
Ooh, that's super good. So your understanding of human beings should be quite powerful. In fact, being in the bartender business, that's something that facilitates the engagement with people, the understanding of people.
I believe that to be true. Yeah, by having to listen to people, even the words they're not saying, yeah, it makes me what I believe is a powerful facilitator and powerful strategist. So yeah.
That's true. Tell me, so just to understand the size of the problem, I wanted to understand what are the common mistakes that businesses make still today when trying to bring their strategy to execution? And especially out of your own experience, what have you observed?
Okay, well, we'll start on the assumption that they actually have a formal strategy in the first place, because most of the time that's already being generous. But let's say that an organization does have a formal strategic plan, formal direction. I think the biggest problem is balancing the urgent operational and the longer term, air quotes, strategic. And it's like working on the business versus in the business. Everybody is, air quotes, busy. And so sufficiently resourcing the amount of time, money, energy, focus, collaboration, communication to be able to like bring these projects to life is the biggest challenge, because you're kind of fighting the forces of inertia. You're fighting people's desire for the same, but it's really an exercise in moving towards individual performance versus collective outcomes, and recognizing that for most organizations, the only way a strategic plan gets implemented successfully is effective collaboration, communication at scale.
Now, it could be also a challenge sometimes that you have a strategy, but that's a strategy that you had like 1-2 years ago. And let me tell you this, I have observed also that if things are going that fast, how can you keep and still use a strategy that you have for 1 or 2 years ago? Shouldn't it be a little bit more iterative, more changing, more fluid in order to be up to date? And yeah, what's your thought about that?
I think an organization can only move as fast as its own internal capacity. So if you have a strategic plan that is 1 or 2 years old and it is still the same, I would say one of two things have occurred. Either you haven't implemented successfully, or the world has changed such that your priorities are different, but the old ones still remain. So, for example, IT infrastructure. If you haven't solved your IT infrastructure, it doesn't mean it's no longer a problem. It just means that whatever fire has come up is bigger, or you just haven't addressed it. Similarly with sales culture, whatever else might come up.
Let's be a little bit philosophical. So
Sure.
that everybody understands the concept of strategy. Strategy, is it like a definition of a problem, or is it like a mix between a problem and a potential solution that you are going to implement?
Well, if we're really going to get philosophical, what really is a problem? If a problem is the kind of juxtaposition between current state and desired future state, then the problem then creates itself. And I think that you need to make strategy a problem if it is to be successfully implemented. Otherwise, it becomes a nice to have versus a must have. But fundamentally, as we view strategy, it's we are here, we want to be here, how do we close the gap? And then how do we address that, given that we have to make choices and trade-offs between what we want to do, what we can do, and then the kind of sequencing of all of that.
Now, I mentioned earlier on that you wrote a book already a couple of years back, but I guess that is still something that it is quite important and relevant for our today world and the book was about alignment. Do you have yourself a specific a process for achieving a strategic alignment?
Absolutely. I mean, it's called our aligned strategy development process. I don't know if that was a softball question, but I'll take it. But yes, I mean, for groups, really getting them on the same page, moving from implied to explicit, having a real clear destination. That is the number one thing we do as a firm. And it is, to me, a prerequisite of organizational success and efficacy.
So wait, and can you describe a little bit how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thank you. I love your questions. These are great. Okay, so fundamentally, the biggest problem that we solve for teams is what we call the multiple destination trap. And I don't know if in your research you found this or not. So I'm trying to tell you stuff that you haven't read already. And basically, different people have different ideas of what success look like. They're all going to different places. They have too many options, too many alternatives, and they're stuck because they're not moving. And so what we offer to teams is what we call our one destination model. Everybody is aligned towards a clear vision of where they want to go, mission, values, priorities, goals, and actions. And then we walk that through our kind of 2 or 3 day process, looking at current state, future state, risks and roadblocks, prioritization, and then implementation planning is what you talked about first. Most people do their strategic plan and they never think about how they're actually going to implement it. And so we incorporate that as part of the planning process to kind of front load the needs. And I'm happy to go into that more, but I love that you're asking about it. I'm not going to lie.
The part that where I'm interested, because, okay, it's just because of the name of this podcast, growth hacking culture. So the cultural part, which implies that people have a certain way of doing things. How important is this in this strategic alignment, that to have this people side fixed?
It is everything. I mean, I think that's what differentiates us. And I don't want to make it sound like a sales pitch because it's genuinely not intended to be, is that while we try to approach strategy is human focused, because at the end of the day, the only thing in organizations are human beings. So we incorporate management science, organizational behavior, psychology to understand not only the, on paper strategy, and I'm sure you've heard the term, your listeners have, shelf plan. There's a document that sits on a shelf and never gets moved versus a plan that actually gets moved forward. And the difference there is the buy-in and the culture around strategy. And then additionally, when we look at our framework for implementation, which we call our 6 critical capacities for strategy implementation, we focus on the environment around the plan versus the plan itself. So yes, you need to be aligned on a direction and priorities and tasks and goals and OKRs or however you want to look at it. But then also, like, is the organism that is an organization supported for strategy execution? Is there the right communication? Are we tracking and monitoring? Is there leadership and accountability? Is there change management? Is there alignment? And so all of those things, as I'm sure you've seen in your career, are prerequisites for actually getting the job done, let alone just a document.
You know what? Suddenly there was a couple of memories back in my days of corporate of these beautiful, nice consultants, very expensive sometimes, from these big five who were coming to my corporate job, facilitating any of these strategic alignment workshops, and people was almost never mentioned. And that was why often we were failing, because the people side, which is for me too, is something that is quite essential, wasn't considered into the equation. And it wasn't just about application of change management. It's about it goes beyond that. It goes considering the current capabilities today, and that was never mentioned on this 2 days workshop with this $10,000 per hour consultants.
Yeah, I think that
But they were cute though, huh? They were nice and
a
nice
nice
and
haircut. Yeah, you gotta pay that. Well, I think for us, I'll just say as and so like, you asked about my training and my background. I started this because I got ripped off as a business owner. And I wanted to make sure that business owners were able to kind of see around the corner. I'm not saying protecting against expensive consultants. I'm rather seeing like anticipating the risks that might impact their organization. But leadership teams, as they create these strategies, I think most of them understand that, hey, we have to get our people involved. But it's really the assumption that will our team want to go to this place isn't always clear and obvious, because even if it's in their best interest, it fundamentally bumps up against the human psyche, which is, I have to do work. This sounds like different type of work. I don't want to do different type of work. Therefore, this sounds like change. Change is bad. I don't want to do it. So like as a leadership team, the alignment piece is let alone getting the 10, 12, 15 executive team members. But if you're starting to roll it down to 1,000 employees, they need to understand for each and every single one of them what's in it for them, such that they will want to do something different, better, even if objectively it's in their best interest.
Uh, let me understand this. So in your current business, you are working with major corporations, but like a big stake of your business come from SMEs. People who are not like, they don't take the bullshit that we can take in big corporations, fancy words, nice slides, and so on. They want results, and they will see the results quite quickly. Is that the only key differentiator of working with the SMEs?
Okay, let me think about that. So I think SMEs typically are I mean, we focused our clients, right? So we tell people who we're looking for, and we don't take on the ones that we don't. But I think SMEs, small to medium enterprises, typically entrepreneurial, typically adaptive, excuse me, typically really care about their people because they're so close to them. And so we've built a process around our customer and not kind of the other way around. Whereas, when I was writing business plans for people, which is the original SME strategy, it wasn't coming out of a corporate development budget. It was coming out of a food and clothing budget. Like this was the individual people's money. And so I said, hey, we have to absolutely make sure that this is valuable. And then I was maybe alluding to it earlier. We don't call ourselves consultants because a consultant will tell you what to do. We're a facilitator. And for us, it's really important that they have the ownership so they don't spend $250,000 on a document because they can't afford to do that. They really need to be empowered to move the thing forward. But going back to your question, the difference between a big corporate and an SME, I'd say the kind of ceiling of who we work with is, high couple $1 million, or like hundreds of million, so 800 million is probably the biggest, but some billion-dollar organizations, I'm not lying. It's just about how the heck the team works together. And that's why they hire us, not necessarily to have the plan, but to have the alignment to make sure whether it's the executive, the senior managers, a sub engineering team, or whatever can effectively collaborate.
Yeah. Um, Now, in these processes of strategic planning, sometimes we have heard like, I mean, as long as I have been working, I have heard about these SMART goals. And it almost sounds a little bit like a buzzword because I've been using it, but to tell you the truth, it wasn't like that that easy. I was spending quite a lot of time in crafting the wording, the rhetoric behind, and very little was expected regarding the outcomes. So you spend quite a long time preparing them. And today, I was wondering, now that the world is a little bit more agile, we hear more and more often about the world of OKRs, objective and key results. What's your take on that? Should we like forget the SMART goals that we have been hammered with that for I don't know how many years, 30, 40 years, I guess, and then decide to go into the direction of using OKRs in order to have better ways to inspire other people and also to have a direction?
How in depth would you like me to go on this one?
Listen, it is a personal question, in fact,
Yeah.
because I want to have answers to that.
Okay. So, okay, perfect. So here we go. So, my understanding, which doesn't mean it's true, it's just what I believe to be true. OKR started because they were trying to incentivize, they were trying to direct behavior. So they would have objectives. Actually, they would have key results. It started with key results, which I would say is probably most akin to SMART goals. I mean, here is the number, as in, I want to make sure that we get to $10 million in revenue. Well, people were accomplishing the $10 million in revenue, but they were doing it with zero profit. For example, there was negative behavior because there wasn't a clear tie-in. So I could sell $10 million in stuff at zero margin. But that's obviously not the goal. We want to have top line and profitability. Or, hey, I want to make sure that you add 100 customers, but you can do it in the worst way possible that they have a bad experience. Well, that's obviously not sustainable. So then they added objectives to it so that you have the qualitative and the quantitative. So not only did you have the target, but the outcome. So why I share that is SMART goals are effectively the same thing. SMART, for those of you that are listeners that might not have heard it before, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound, which all it means is you want to go from X, where you are, to Y by a date. Functionally, why I think it's important is so that you're measuring in terms of outcomes versus activity. And I find that is the biggest bane of most of our leadership's existence, not because they don't know how to set the SMART goals, because I don't think they want to. Because as soon as you set a goal or a target or a threshold, it A, opens up the possibility of failure, and B, sometimes they don't have the mental pliability to be able to set a target to something that is unknown. And so as a human being, you don't want to look stupid or you just can't do it. So for example, things that we're used to measuring: weight, money, you're doing fundraising as an angel investor or you're investing as an angel investor. Hey, I want to have, targets, ratios, whatever. What people don't understand how to measure is softer stuff. Hey, how do I set a goal under processes or organizational improvement? How do I set a goal, SMART goal or OKR around culture? And so I think the underlying point, and this was surprisingly succinct, is how can you set clear targets for your people to direct the actions that you want to take and create a high performance culture, which you're all about,
Yeah.
because then it's not about activity. It's not about doing a bunch of stuff. It's about actually knowing if the stuff gets done.
Hmm.
I can
That's
go on.
that's an interesting point of view. Now, if you had the opportunity to no, let's rephrase the question. What are the tips that that you would recommend to a CEO for overcoming the challenges of bringing this strategy to execution? If you wanted to be blunt, and that's the key word, because sometimes we don't dare to say to the CEOs that's what you're doing really wrong. In a blunt way, what are the kind of things that he should be doing in order to bring strategy to execution?
Okay, you tell me if I didn't scratch your OKR itch, because I'm happy to go back to that. If I didn't actually answer your question, we can go there. Okay, so before I go into this one, I think that the biggest challenge I see with CEOs specifically, their job is to be several steps ahead of their leadership team. Fundamentally, they are responsible for vision. They are responsible for big picture. They need to have the foresight, whereas the sometimes executive team needs to be strategic, but they also need to be somewhat in the operational. The problem is that those CEOs jump into the process kind of 2-3 steps down the line, so their thought process is already ahead of the rest of the team. So what the CEOs need to do is they need to go backwards and take their executive team with them, because the executive team can't execute a strategy for which they don't understand. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you have friends, or maybe you do this yourself, where they will start a story, but they're already halfway into the story by the time they start talking to you. They've already formulated everything, and then they're already going. That's what CEOs do. They're already way ahead. They've already thought of the process. So they said, okay, now we need to do this. And everybody else is saying, well, what the heck are you talking about? What about the first half of the story? So what CEOs need to do is slow down a little bit, make sure that they bring their people into the plan, help them understand not just the what, the doing, but the why and the process that led to it. And then from an execution standpoint, support the communication, the governance of the overall plan by setting the structures, making it a priority, and then allocating resources. And I'm not saying write big checks. I am saying, if you expect your team to, since you're in Switzerland, I'll use a Switzerland example. If you're expecting your team to drive or swim, let's say drive 10 kilometers worth of gas, they need to be allocated the time, money, energy to move it forward. The CEO is best positioned to do that. And so creating the accountability and support structure up and down to make sure that the job can get done. Otherwise, you get to the end of the year and nothing gets done. Additionally, if there's too many priorities, nobody knows what to focus on. They don't focus on anything. Nothing gets done. People are confused and frustrated, and the CEO is still running 1,000,000 miles an hour.
So if I understand correctly, many CEOs suck at they forget, let's say, about explaining why are we doing what we're doing. That's correct. So
it is obvious to them, whereas what they communicate is obvious to them. It might not be obvious to the people that they're working with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. That happens to many people that I have met, and that has happened many times to me, Anthony. I have to be sincere about that.
We have a phrase internally called up the mountain. So even I am a CEO. My job is to come with ideas and bring the ideas to the table. The issue with the CEO is sometimes they bring a half-baked idea, incomplete idea, or it's an idea that they, in their heart of hearts, is sharing as hey, I'm going to present this to the team as an invitation, as a brainstorm, as a possibility. Whereas the leaders will hear it as, okay, great, I'm running with that. That is directive versus suggestive. And that's where teams can get into trouble, because they're saying, well, you asked me to do that thing. I didn't ask you to do it. I was just talking to you about it. And meanwhile, everybody's off running, doing their own thing.
According to you, is there some technology that we can use that can help us better bring this strategy to execution? But you see what I mean, Anthony, is that I have also seen this type of technology where you have to spend hours and hours to feed the beast, and just to have the outcome that you will have with an Excel file, with a PowerPoint, and so on. It seems that it brings structure, but then you have to feed it with so much data that, you spend too much time and nobody reads that stuff. So do you have the feeling that today, with AI with tools that have been developed. There is something that can help organizations, small or big ones, to be able to have better communication, that everybody's aware about what is happening, that is not like you have to read 30 pages of a Word document. What's your call about that?
I mean, okay, so because I'm a nerd and I like linguistics, a technology is merely a system. Technology, like the real tool of technology, is just a technology, not the newest technology. So, as nerdy as I am, a piece of paper is technology. It is a technology. And so, do you need to have the most advanced technology? No, you need to have a technology. And so, I would rather take a piece of paper that people use than the most expensive best system that they don't use. But often, the technologies that are missing truly is a rolling agenda, is like project plans, is a dashboard. And when what's some great with some, we'll call it low sophistication organizations, is they're already doing it. And they say, do you have a whiteboard? Can you draw the number 1 on it? Great. If today it's a 1, make it a 2. You do not need it to be complicated. You just need it to be visible. And I think that that's where people get so lost. They say, hey, I love strategic planning tracking software for the right organization where reporting is required and supported culturally. But if a team is going from square one, all I want them to do is to be able to say, this is the number today. This is what I want the number to be at. How far are we? And what are we doing? And to support documentation, clarity, specificity. So a technology like a piece of paper or a whiteboard or a Word doc. God forbid they use a 100-line Excel spreadsheet to track action items. Please don't do that. It's not going to help you. Really keep it simple. Ugly but effective is the word I like to use.
Listen, I'm impressed because the practicality of what you're saying is so nice. And I can easily imagine a CEO just taking a picture with that whiteboard where he wrote 1, 2, 3 and sending it to the rest of the organization. And this is already better than having sophisticated systems that is not maintainable, it's not sustainable. Nobody will care, nobody will watch. But a picture of the CEO with the whiteboard behind is inspirational, it's clear, and everybody gets it.
Yeah, you can't spend, if you're going to spend 2, 3, 4 hours on reporting. And again, some organizations need to do the reporting. But ultimately, if you're saying, I wanted to set a goal of 100 meetings, how many did you do? The other practical nature of it, thank you, by the way, I appreciate the compliment. The other practical nature of it is it stops all the nonsense talking about it. It's like, how did you do? And it's like, well, I did this and I did this and this went well. And it's like, that's not what I'm asking. You said you were going to have 20 meetings. How many did you have? The bane of many leaders is that they hate spending time in meetings. And I agree. I am not pro meeting. I am pro information transfer. And so the more effective you can be at transferring information and getting the needed questions answered, the faster you'll go. Strategy reviews don't need to take a day every quarter if everybody's saying, here are my 5 goals, here's what I did, here's the number, here's what I did last month, here's what I'm going to do next month. Are we good? Good. Like, it doesn't need to take forever, but it's more of a muscle of strategy implementation, which is really what we're trying to like develop in people.
Oh, la, la. When I review the 20 years of my corporate career, I can tell you that one of the things, I had the impression, in fact, that the thing that I learned the most is how to do PowerPoints of 100-page slides. And that was very bad for my entrepreneurial journey because it took me time to unlearn all these bad habits.
But it's great if you're a VC and you love investing in companies, you want to learn how people pad their stats. I was walking through my buddy's consulting firm, and he had this beautiful brand new office with computers in a row. And I said it earnestly, and I said, wow, imagine how many PowerPoints you guys make in here. And one of the employees laughed because that's what they do. And sometimes PowerPoints are absolutely required. They are important. They're a valuable tool, but not how we do things.
Now, coming back to a little bit to my world, I'm going to bring you back to the world of work culture. Do you think it is feasible to develop, create a culture of execution. But when I'm saying a culture of execution, I'm not talking to you about a factory where there is a master guy who says output of plus 10% during this time. No, we are talking about a culture of execution that where people feels involved, committed to, if they spot a problem, that there is a correction, that where everybody feels like, I feel the need to solve that problem, this thing that is broken, this, I don't know, this piece of banana that somebody forgot in the floor, I'm going to pick it up and because this is mine, my stuff. So is it possible to create a culture of execution? And if yes, how?
Okay. My understanding is that you have masters in engineering and you went to HEC, which is like very good development place. I went to a university, which is a great university. I got kicked out of my first university, but fundamentally, I learned about a lot of business things. Why I bring those two things up is that not everybody has that experience. Not everybody has formal education. No, not everybody thinks about systems. Like it's kind of, some people are wired like it and some people need to learn it. And I would say the great majority of people never learned how to work into systems. So I believe that everybody can be developed into having a structure, a system, a mind for strategy execution. But for the most part, they have never learned it. They have never learned specificity. They have never learned accountability. They have learned their skill. It makes them tremendous people, but they just have never been taught the tools to track for it. And so largely it's a muscle memory thing that organizations need to commit the time and energy to. I just recently did a strategic planning session it's a $300 million organization. We did their strategy session last year. We've been working with them for 9-10 months on their implementation. We did another strategy session. And the conversation went so differently. Why? And I asked, why? What was the difference between this year and last year? And they said, muscle memory. We have been taught and trained and forced into specificity, clarity, measurability, and then they were able to go bang, 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 smart goals, bang, 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 smart goals. They now have a dashboard of 10 things, but it wasn't like that before.
But you, you see, that's even for people who go and pay expensive MBAs. So they go to expensive education, and at the end, they are going to learn super complicated models that where it is difficult to, I mean, you can use it to structure thoughts, but it doesn't have the simplicity of understanding accountability. And by the way, accountability is a behavior that people can map through repetition. Having a structured thought process in order to define a problem is also something that you can train. It's like driving a car. It looks difficult and you get nervous, but you don't need as an expensive education basically to do that. And this is where I'm blaming a lot of corporations that are spending millions of dollars with complicated technical stuff, while their people needs to have more development in terms of meta skills, systems. I love that word, systems, so that people think in a structured manner or do things in a structured manner, so they know how to learn instead of you teach them what exactly they should be learning.
Well, the way I thought about it as we were sharing about it is, I think people think they're too damn smart. But fundamentally, it's not what is the most complicated you can make it. It is what is the lowest common denominator, because the strategy only gets implemented if everybody in the organization implements it. So don't build it for your MBAs, build it for your people that that don't understand it. That way you democratize the strategy implementation. If however many people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people in your organization understand how to make the levers work in their language, that's what makes the difference. That's why when we apply strategy and we work through our alignment program, this is a plug for myself, is that we try to use metaphors and try to take concepts that people know and attach it to the concepts they don't know, which supports the learning of a new skill and behavior, so that we just don't say, hey, OKRs, let's go. It's saying, hey, if I'm trying to lose weight, if I'm trying to lose 10 pounds, well, if I'm trying to lose 10 pounds over 3 months versus 10 pounds over the next 20 years, the amount of energy and effort is going to be different. you don't need to be an MBA to fundamentally understand how to lose weight because it's inherent to everybody. So how can you talk everybody's language and across cultures on top of that, especially if you're in a global business?
Yeah. And I think that here, out of this episode, I would highlight this part that it is possible to have to develop a culture of execution, but it doesn't have to be a painful exercise, but people needs to be trained on systematic ways, taught how to mental processes in order to develop the we can call it values or right behaviors that are going to be able to make that people are committed, collaborative, that they're able to have a thought process that is structured, but it doesn't have to be complicated. As you said, it is a little by little thing, and it's targeted to the bottom of the organization. Yes, so that you have thousands of people contributing to your strategy and having impact for in the execution.
Well, since you talked about culture and it just kind of popped to mind is, I think that, and this is a belief, that leaders have a heuristic that people don't want to do the strategy. And it's not incorrect, but I think it's more apt to say that everybody just wants to be successful. And so like the gap isn't strategy, culture, OKRs. The gap is, do people understand how to be successful? And then how can you actually like give them the tools to do that? Like it's like if you play sports, I use this example all the time. Like when you play sports and you're just playing for fun, you play for fun. As soon as you start keeping score, you start playing more intensely. It increases the activity because inherently human beings want to win. And so by not giving people the tools, by not helping them understand what the metrics are, you're disincentivizing them because they don't understand how to win. And going back to values and behavior, it's like playing a game without the rules. If they don't know the rules, are they going to play the game very long? Because the rules keep freaking changing. And so like by putting values and behavior as you stated, and also by supporting the OKRs, goals, objectives, you help everybody in your organization win. And that's what creates a scaling, high successful culture.
I have a tricky question, and I thought about it because, I mean, I relate it to me. Sometimes when you are directing your company, you can have a certain level of limitations. Let's say that for me is going to be technology. So I understand technology, how it could be done, how things could be done, but I have my limitations. I don't want to go dig into certain areas, and I'm working with apps development and so on because that helps a little bit automatize my business. But if a CEO from a SME or even in a corporation is struggling to achieve his strategic goals, and this is partially because of his personal limitation, which is not a sin, in fact, to don't know everything. What advice would you give to that person in order to help him find his strategic goals and put them to work despite these limitations that anyone can have, by the way?
Okay, so I think the simplest and most direct and least helpful answer is build or buy. Either you learn it or you pay for it.
Yeah.
So find talent, find skills, that kind of thing. My natural approach would say it's not reasonable to expect everybody to have all of the skills. So when people get into business, they have this warped idea that they will be successful. And statistically, they will not be successful. When we have companies that say, oh, I'm at 10 million, 20 million so hard, or 20 to 50 million so hard, or 50 to 100 million, it's supposed to be hard. Most people don't do it. Sorry for your audio levels, everybody. It's that
we have this warped perception that's growing and scaling a company is easy and everybody should have the aptitude. Like the thousands of tens of thousands of millions of people that have failed along the way, the people who just don't have, somebody called me one day, I was in South Carolina taking a phone call, and this guy says, I have a great idea for a thing, but I don't have any skills to build it. And I say, well, that sucks. Pay somebody to do it or find a different idea, because if you don't have, like, the idea is only good as you can germinate it and grow it and scale it. There's tons of ideas out there, there's tons of implementable things that you could do. The challenge is, like, what are those iterative steps that you can take? And so if you don't understand technology, if technology is a gap, either learn it so it's no longer a gap, move it from a weakness to a strength, or bare least average. Find somebody on your team that complements your skills. In most cases, find a different path, because the different path is sometimes easier. So I don't want to dissuade people, yourself included, from trying to do what they do. But I think that holistically, we have a notion that everything should be doable and should be relatively easy and accomplishable, because of, we see the Facebooks, Googles, Twitters, you have these trillion-dollar businesses. They are certainly the outliers, not the norm. Growing a business to $1 million is a feat. Growing a business to whatever level you're at is a tremendous feat. It is what millions of people before you have failed in doing. And so I think that all entrepreneurs, all organizational leaders should have compassion with themselves as they grow their businesses, because it is not normal and it's freaking hard. So I don't know if that gives you the answer, but I just kind of like the solace in the fact that, yeah, you can build it, you can buy it, but ultimately it's a hard thing to do either path.
It does, and it made me think about the importance of self-awareness, either as an entrepreneur or even when you are directing a big business in corporation. Like, self-awareness is something that is basic in order to know if you are capable to bring an idea into execution. If you don't have this understanding about the person who you are, the capabilities that you have today that you can still acquire, or even the tricky ways to say, I buy it. Because when you were saying I buy it, I was thinking that is not the only way to go and pay for an expensive consultant. You can seduce people to be in your business.
Yeah,
because
you hire a CTO or whatever,
exactly.
right? Or get volunteers.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
There is different ways.
I generally speaking, in strategy, is for you to play to your strengths. And one of my favorite expressions that applies to me, and you might have heard it, and it says, if you are more charming than you are good looking, avoid loud clubs.
Love that one. I have never heard it, Anthony.
Okay, so, when you're building your strategy, build from a place of strength, because it will be faster, it'll be cheaper, you'll have a better time. And I think that is, like, of course, you can't avoid the hard stuff, but the hard stuff is hard for a reason. And so play to your strengths. If technology is not a strength, bring somebody along, partner. And that's why those biggest companies, because they're tremendously good at bringing in great talent, great people, great skills, not necessarily expensive consultants, because they won't enable you. They won't empower you to do it at scale at long term. They will solve a short-term problem. So it's really about building the capacity internally, I believe, for sustainable and scalable growth.
Anthony, I have to thank you for the time that you have devoted for this episode on bringing organization from strategy to execution. I love the way, in fact, you have put into the map of, because planning and all the stuff that looks like very dry, but then you put the human being and the capabilities of these humans in order to make things happen in the center. And this is something that is quite lovely to hear. And I love your blunt way of saying things. Thank you very much, Anthony, for the time. Tell me, how can people reach you out if they have questions about alignment, about change, about making things happen? How can they reach you out?
Well, first of all, the pleasure was all mine. We talked about the different cultures when we started talking. You know, diversity, equity, inclusion is a big topic that everybody talks about, but really bringing diversity of thought and directness on your team. If you can't have people shoot straight, so to speak, with their conversations, that is another challenge to a high performance culture. But really, it was a pleasure. Thank you. Personally, it was great. Folks can find me SMEstrategy.net. If you have any strategic planning questions about how to I do this, put SME strategy at the end of it. I will almost guarantee that there's an answer. We have 25,000 readers a month on our blog. We have answers to almost everything. And then you can connect with me personally, Anthony C. Taylor, on LinkedIn.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I'm going to be putting all these links. In fact, I have them already captured somewhere, but thank you, Anthony. Have an excellent day. It was lovely to spend time with you.
The pleasure was all mine, Ivan. Thank you so much.